We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Hey Amud Aleph and Meseches Sotah. This is Sotah Daf 45a. We had in the previous Amud Machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon how many of the Sanhedrin need to go out in terms of the procedure of the Egla Arufa. Rabbi Yehuda says you need to have 5 judges from the Sanhedrin come out, and Rabbi Shimon says just 3 judges from the Sanhedrin. And the Gemara in the previous Amud said that Rabbi Yehuda learns the extra 2 judges from the extra Vav in the word V'shovtecha. And now the Gemara says that Rabbi Shimon, he holds Vav lo mashmalei, he holds that the extra Vav is not something that he's going to darshan, and that's why he disagrees and says only 3 of the judges and not 5 of the judges. And the Gemara continues, Ela me'ata, but according to what we said above, meaning to say, according to what we said, that every time the pasuk uses a language of plural, it's indicating to add another set of 2 judges. So v'yatzu shnaim, it also says they go out, that should be another 2 judges. Umaddu shnaim, and then it says they have to measure the corpse where the nearest city is, that should be another 2 judges. And if you're going to add now 4 judges, Rabbi Yehuda harei kantish, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who had 5 judges, it should really be 5 plus 4, it should really be 9 judges. And Rabbi Shimon harei kan shiva, according to Rabbi Shimon, it should be 3 plus 4, it should really be a total of 7 judges. And the Gemara says to that, those words are used for the following brisa. V'yatzu, again it says, and they go out, hein v'lo shluchein. What that means is they go out and not their messengers. They have to be the ones to do it directly. Umadadu, and they measure. What does that teach us? Sha'afilu nimsa ba'alil la'ir. Even if it's clear which city the corpse is closest to, hayu moded, and they still have a mitzvah, they still would measure. Shem mitzvah lasok b'medida, because it's a mitzvah to do the actual measurement, even if you're not measuring to determine which city the corpse is the closest to, still you need to measure. And the Gemara continues, Masnisim deloka Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Our Mishnah is not like the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Titania, as we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Zikeinecha, when it says in the pasuk, your elders, Zu Sanhedrin, that refers to the Sanhedrin coming out for the procedure of the Egla Arufa. Shoftecha zemelech v'kohen gadol. When it says Shoftecha, that refers to the king and the kohen gadol. They come out for the procedure as well. Melech techsiv melech, because it's written melech b'mishpat yamid aretz. It uses the word mishpat by a melech, so Shoftecha refers to melech, and kohen gadol, it also refers to kohen gadol, techsiv, as it's written, uvasa la kohanim halavim vel hashofet asher yiyeh v'gomer. Again, it uses the word shofet by the kohen, and so we understand again that this word Shoftecha refers to both the king and the kohen gadol. And the Gemara continues, Iboy Luhu, they had the following question. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov b'melech v'kohen gadol hu depolik. Is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov only arguing about the issue of the melech and the kohen gadol, whether they come out as well? Aval b'Sanhedrin, but when it comes to the number of the members of the Sanhedrin that have to come out for the procedure of Egla Arufa, Ikar Rabbi Yehuda, Ikar Rabbi Shimon Srilei. Either he holds like Rabbi Yehuda or he holds like Rabbi Shimon. He doesn't disagree on the number of Sanhedrin. He follows one of those 2 shitas. Either he says it's 5 members from the Sanhedrin or 3 members from the Sanhedrin. Dilmar, maybe Sanhedrin nami polig. Maybe he argues by the Sanhedrin as well. Adika kula Sanhedrin, that he holds the entire Sanhedrin needs to come out, and he understands it to mean that the Sanhedrin, the whole Sanhedrin, and the king and the kohen gadol, they all have to come out. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Tashma, come and hear the following proof. Mitzoin Zaken Mamre Abe Pagi. Let's say the Zaken Mamre, which is the rebellious elder who rules against the Sanhedrin. Let's say he finds the Sanhedrin and his act of rebellion is not in the area where the Sanhedrin generally are. He finds them Abe Pagi. Abe Pagi was an area in Yerushalayim. V'himra alein, and he rebels against them in that area. They're not in their normal chamber. So Yachol Te Amraso Amra, I might think that his rebellion is considered a rebellion and he's punished. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, "V'kamtev yalisa el hamakom." It says you get up and you go to the place. Melamed shehamakam gorm. You see that the place is critical. The place is essential. They have to be in the proper chamber. And so the Gemara now says, if he found them somewhere else, what happened? How many of them were found somewhere else? The nafakama. How many of them went out from their general chamber? Elam with the nafak miktsas, and if you're going to say that just part of them left, so dil mahanach the iga gavoy kavase svirlu. But 1 second, maybe those who remained in the chamber, who are inside, maybe they hold like the zaken mamre. Of course, this might not be a situation of zaken mamre. Elapshida the nafakulu. Rather, it's obvious the case has to be that the entire Sanhedrin was found in this area. Ulamai. So now, why did they go out? For what reason did they leave? If they left for something that's not even a mitzvah, it's voluntary. Mi matzu nafki, are they even allowed to leave for something like that? But the pasuk says, but it's written in Shir Hashirim, Sharech agan hasahar al yachzar hamozik. We darshan from this pasuk al yachzar hamozik, which means that there shouldn't be anything lacking in the amount of wine that's poured. We darshan that to mean she'im nitzrach echad mehem lotzes, that let's say one of them needs to leave. Im yesham esrim ushlosha keneged Sanhedrin ketana, if there remains remains there, 23 judges corresponding to the size of a smaller Sanhedrin, so then he can leave. But a person's not allowed to leave if he doesn't leave 23 judges staying in the chamber. And that's what we learn out from Al Yechsar HaMazik. We darshan from that pasuk that there always have to be members in the chamber of the Sanhedrin. So Elab Shita, rather, isn't it obvious? Lidvar mitzvah, it has to be that they're leaving for a mitzvah purpose. That's the only reason that the entire Sanhedrin can leave. And Lamai, what kind of mitzvah would the Sanhedrin leave for? Lav lemedidas eglav Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Aren't they leaving for measuring by an egla rufa? And this follows Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And you see that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds when it comes to measuring for the egla rufa, the entire Sanhedrin leaves. Amarle Abaye said to him, "Lo no, Dilma lahosif alo ir v'alo azaros." There's another reason that they're able to leave. They might be leaving because they want to add on to the city or onto the azaros, onto the courtyards. Kedetanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, ein mosifin alo ir v'alo azaros ela bebezin shel shivim v'yechad. You're not allowed to add on to the city or the courtyards unless you're doing it through the bezdin of 71, and that's also a mitzvah that requires the entire bezdin, so they could all leave, or they would all be allowed to leave in such a situation. But the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavasei de Rav Yosef, we have a brisa that supports what Rav Yosef said. Mitzvah Beis Pagi v'himra alei, and again by a Zoki and Mamre, let's say he finds them by Beis Pagi and he rebels against them. Kegon sheyatzu l'medidas egel, it says explicitly, for example, they left the chamber of the Sanhedrin for the purpose of measuring for egla arufa, or lahosef alo ir v'alo azaros, or to add on to the city or the courtyards. Yachol te'am rasu amra, I might think his rebellion is considered a rebellion. Talmud lomer v'kamta v'yalisa malamid sham makom gorim. The pasuk says that you get up and you have to go up to the place. That shows that the place is critical. And in any case, what do you see in this brisa? You see in this brisa that the entire Sanhedrin goes out to measure by egla arufa. And Rashi explains v'himra alein, and he rebels against them. Kolomar, what it means to say is as follows: Al masha shoal mehem sham, meaning he asked them a question over there. V'yamru lo halacha, and they said the halacha. And then halach lira, then he goes to a city v'hora lasos kederach shahaya mor b'tchila, and he continues to issue the same ruling as before. He doesn't listen to the Sanhedrin. Dehavalei mamre al piyam, that's considered a situation of a rebellion. Hamakom, what is the chamber? What is the place where they normally stay? Hamiyuchad lemishpat, it's the chamber that's designated for judgment. V'hu lishkas hagazis, and that's a reference to the lishkas hagazis. And Rashi continues, and the Gemara brought a pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Again, the pasuk was Sharech Agan Hasahar Al Yechsar HaMazik, and Rashi explains Sharech, this was your navel, Zeh Sanhedrin Sheyosheves B'tibura Shel Eretz Yisrael. That refers to the Sanhedrin because they sit in the center, so to speak, by the navel of Eretz Yisrael. Agan Hasahar means Shasuyin Kechatzi Levon. It's like the round goblet. What that refers to is the fact that it's like a half moon. Agula B'shuras Yeshivas, and that's the formation. They sit in this round formation like a half a moon when they're sitting in judgment. Kadesha Yukulon Rowan Zeh. That's in order that all of them should be able to see one another. And then it says you shouldn't have anything missing in the wine that's in the cup. Hamazek Kashir Mazak Shnei Chalak Emayim V'Yechad Yain. You have a specific measurement when you dilute wine. It's 2 parts water and 1 part wine. V'Afkan Sarach Sheyishtayar Shlish. That's exactly what we're saying over here. You have to have at least 1/3 of the members always in the chamber of hewn stone, always in the Lishkas Hagazis. And Rashi continues, the Gemara said that you have to have the entire Sanhedrin to add on to the city and onto the Azaros. And Al-Ir, what are we referring to? Which city? Al-Yerushalayim. We're talking about adding on to Yerushalayim. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Nimtza Tamun Begal, if the corpse is found and it's buried in a pile of stones, or Tole Be'ilan, or it's hanging in a tree. So in those cases, we don't do the procedure of Egla Arufa. And the Gemara says, Leima Mas Nisan Rav Yehuda hi v'lo Rabbanan. Let us say that our Mishnah follows the opinion of Rav Yehuda and not the opinion of the Rabbanan. The Tanya, as we learned in the following brisa, V'shachachta Omer Basada. The pasuk says that you forget the sheaves in the field. This is talking about the concept of shicha by leket, shicha, and payah. So it's left for the poor. So prat l'taman. So we understand from that pasuk it means to say that shicha is that it's left in the field to exclude a situation where it's hidden, where it's buried in the field and you can't see it. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachamim Omer, but the Chachamim say the opposite. Basada in the field, l'rabos asataman. That comes to include a situation where it's buried, where it is hidden. And Rashi over here says, Bisada, again, it says that it's in the field, V'shachachta Omer Basada, but Rav Yehuda mashma Bisada al Pnei Hasada. Rav Yehuda's understanding that Basada means it's on the face of the field. You can easily see it, it's in the open. Well, Rabbanan mashma Besoch Hasada. The Rabbanan, they understand the word Basada means within the field, so it could include even a situation where it's buried. And so the Gemara is now assuming the same machlokas that applies by Shechara in terms of how to understand the word Bisada. That's the exact same machlokas when it comes to the case of Egla Rufa, in terms of whether or not, let's say the corpse is buried, is that excluded or is that included? And we're suggesting, just like Rabbi Yehuda says, prat l'tamen, we exclude tamen when it comes to shicha, so too he would say prat l'tamen when it comes to egla rufa. But the Gemara says, Amar Rav says, afilu temer rabbanan. You could even say that our Mishnah follows the rabbanan, even though the rabbanan include tamen by shicha, they would exclude tamen when it comes to egla rufa, because hacha mein yonid dekra and hasa mein yonid dekra all has to do with the context of the pasuk. Here we're following the context of that pasuk, and there we're following the context of that pasuk. T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, ki matzei cholol heicha demistakach. When it says ki matzei cholol, that sounds like it's saying wherever it's found. It doesn't matter if it's buried. It doesn't matter if it's hidden. And so therefore ba'adama. So therefore, if it adds ba'adama on the ground, prat l'tamen, that comes to exclude a situation where it's buried. So that would be how you understand that it's excluded by the case of egla arufa, because the context is that at first, before you have the word ba'adama, it sounds like it could be in any situation. It could even be a situation where it's tamun, and so then the pasuk comes along and says ba'adama to exclude tamun. That everybody could agree to. And over there, it also has to do with the context of the pasuk, meaning according to the Rabbanan, the context there goes a different direction. It includes tamun. T'chsiv, as it's written, ki siktzor ketzircha b'sadecha v'shachachta omer. It says again, you're harvesting your field and you forget a sheaf, and you forget this omer in the field. So shichcha dumya de katzir. So we say that shichcha is similar. We compare it to the word katzir. Ma katzir begoli, just like this, that which you're harvesting is out in the open. Av shichcha begoli. So too, you would understand shichcha to mean that it's out in the open. You forgot it, but it's out in the open. Kasav Rachmana Besada, and so then the pasuk writes Besada l'rabos asat tamen. That comes to include tamen, even in a situation where it's hidden, even in a situation where it's buried. And so therefore the Rabbanan would say again, by the case of Omer, so before the word Besada comes along, I would think it has to be out in the open. Besada comes along and says, no, it doesn't have to be out in the open. It can even include a situation where it is hidden and buried. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Nami, but one second. According to Rabbi Yehuda also, if that's the case, why doesn't he make the same drush as the Rabbanan? He should understand shechacha is similar to the katzir, and initially it should be out in the open, and then we should include a case where it is tamen, where it is hidden. So why does Rabbi Yehuda say prat l'tamen? Why does he exclude a case where it's hidden? And the Gemara says, inachinami, indeed, you're actually correct. Rabbi Yehuda does agree in general with what the Rabbanan are saying. The ella besada lamali, and rather, what is besada for? Miboile, it's needed for the following. L'rabos shechas kam. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda says besada doesn't teach us an inclusion like the Rabbanan, even though if that's what it was talking about, it really should be an inclusion, but it's used for something else. The reason, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is that besada is used to include even if I forgot to harvest. Let's say you have a situation where you're harvesting your field, and there's some of it that you left attached to the ground. So maybe you would think that's not included in shicha, that's not called forgotten because you didn't harvest it at all, and that's actually what besada is coming to include. Even shichas kama, even if you forgot besada, even if you forgot to harvest part of the field, that's also included in shicha. But Rabbanan shichas kama minalahu, and the Rabbanan, where do they learn this idea of shichas kama? Nafkaluhu michi siktzor ketzircha bisadecha. They learn it from the fact that the pasuk says ki siktzor ketzircha bisadecha, and so therefore we understand that bisadecha. We understand that to mean that even if it's that you forgot part of the field, that's also considered shichcha. Rabbi Yehuda responds, Rabbi Avohu Amar Rabbi Elazar. He uses that pasuk for what Rabbi Avo says for what Rabbi Avo says that Rabbi Elazar says. The Amar Rabbi Avo Amar Rabbi Elazar, because Rabbi Avo said that Rabbi Elazar says Prat l'shet safu omrin l'soch sadech haveru. It says besadecha in your field, meaning if the sheaves floated over to his friend's field, so that's not in his own field, so that's excluded. That's not considered shechacha. The Rabbanan mi besada besadecha. The Rabbanan say you can learn two things from this pasuk, because it could have just said besada, then it says besadecha. That adds this other halacha of Rabbi Avo Amar Rabbi Elazar, that again if it's in his friend's field, it's not going to be shechacha. Rabbi Yehuda besadecha lo mashmalei. And Rabbi Yehuda, he doesn't darshan the fact that it could have said besada and it says besadecha. That's not considered extra, and that is not something that he darshans. And Rashi explains, Hasa mein yoni dekra, there it follows the context of the pasuk, Tzrich and the Midrashay, that's how you have to darshan. V'hacha mein yoni dekra tidrish leit. Here also you have to follow the context of the pasuk. Gabe cholol ksib, by the corpse it's written, Ki motzei cholol, kol hecha de mishtakach. It says you're going to find the corpse, so that means anywhere that it's found. V'afilu tamen, that really should include even if it's hidden. And hilkach al karchach ki asa ba'adama, and so therefore the word ba'adama comes along, l'me'ute tamen, as an exclusion of tamen, but that's where it's coming for. The tidrish be'al panehu adama, dilu rebuye lo itzrich. The The drush is that it means on the face of the ground. It has to be clear. It has to be out in the open, and it can't be tamen because if it was to include it, it's already been included. So it must be an exclusion. Af shichacha begoloi, and so then even shichacha that has to be out in the open. V'havei mimayit tamen mimashmus, and again by shichacha the context is the opposite. You would have understood that it has to be out in the open, and you would have already excluded tamen. Ilav, if not for the fact that the pasuk comes along, the hadar rabbi. If not for the fact that the pasuk comes along and then goes ahead and includes it. But then the Gemara said l'shichas kama. We can use that pasuk for shichas kama for a case where you forgot to harvest at all. Shem shakach zavis achas liktzor, meaning let's say there was a corner of the field that he forgot to harvest. Kaya Allah below sashav lakachto. That also counts as shichacha. He can't return to take it. V'achim ashma v'shachachta omer. Oh, v'shachachta v'asada. We darshan it to mean either you forgot in Omer, he forgot a sheaf, or what it means is he even forgot the field itself. He forgot to harvest. Nafkelahu, and then the Gemara said, well, they learned that halacha out mi b'sadecha v'shachachta. It says b'sadecha v'shachachta karibei sheshakach es k'tzasada. You can understand that to mean that he forgot to harvest part of the field. And then the Gemara responded and said that pasuk could also be used for sadecha shetzafu omrin l'soch sadechavero. Let's say the sheaves, they floated over to his friend's field. Shenashva haruach ve'herima es ha'omrim min ha'aretz v'tzifason l'soch sadechavero. Let's say the wind blew it over to his friend's field. V'shachan, and then he forgot it. Kasavar she'ein and shalo. He didn't realize it was his. Nafka mi bisadecha. That's learned out from bisadecha. It has to be in your field. V'lo bisadechavercha, not in your friend's field. V'lo havishicha. That's not called shicha if it's in your friend's field. But the Rabbanan, they will respond, they understand the exclusion of his friend's field, because it could have just said the word besada, but instead it says besadecha, and so it's a machlokas whether we can darshan that change in the word besadecha that it could have said besada. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rabbi Yirmiyah asks the following question. Safu omrin l'soch sadeu. Let's say the sheaves, they float within his own field, meaning they're not on the actual ground, they're on top of something else, like a stone or something. Mahu, so what's the halacha? Avir sadek kesadadami. They're in the airspace of the field, and therefore that's considered like the field and it's regular shechacha. Olav kesadadami, or maybe if it's not on the actual earth, it's on top of something else, so then it's not considered like it's in the field, and it would not be considered shechacha. Amar le Rav Kahana le Rav Papi. So Rav Kahana said to Rav Papi, V'amri lo Rav Kahana le Rav Zavid. Some have the version that Rav Kahana said to Rav Zavid, Tivshot le mid Rabbi Avo Amar Rabbi Elazar. You can answer the question from the teaching that we just had above of Rabbi Avo in the name of Rabbi Elazar. The Amar, because what did Rabbi Elazar say? What did Rabbi Avo say that Rabbi Elazar said? Prat l'shetzafu omrin l'soch sadechavero. He said that we exclude a case where it floated into his friend's field. So dechavero in l'soch sadeulo. It sounds like if it floated into his friend's field, that's a situation that we're going to exclude. But if it's in his own field floating, so to speak, so then we're going to say that it is included. It is not excluded. But the Gemara says that you can't make such a diak. According to your reasoning, when we say in his friend's field, do we mean specifically to exclude it's floating in his friend's field, meaning it's not directly on the ground? If it's placed on the ground, we wouldn't exclude it. That's not true. The point of the drush is that it needs to be in your field, and you don't have that over here. It's in his friend's field. It's not in his own field. So obviously, when we exclude the case where it's in his friend's field, it could even be directly on the ground. When we say it floated, we don't mean it's floating. We don't mean it's sitting there on top of a stone or something. Rather, we just mean that it only got there through floating. It was blown by the wind, and therefore you'd have no proof to our question if it was floating, so to speak, in his own field. And Rashi over here says, Safu omrin l'soch sadeu, meaning again, shayimutalam agabi evan. Let's say they're not on the ground, they're on a stone, or amud, or on a pillow, or on a pillar, or zu al zu, one on top of the other. Any of those cases, that's the question. Pratlish etzafu v'kasal kadaitach tzafu mamish al gabi evan, al gabi amud. Right now, we think that when it's in the friend's field, it's also floating. It's on top of a stone or on top of a pillar. And the Gemara said that cannot be the case. Again, it's talking just in his friend's field, even if it's directly on the ground. So we cannot draw any inference from that teaching. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here the following proof. This is from a Braisa from the Tosefta. Omer shehechzik bo lo'olicho le'ir. Let's say the person, he took the sheaf and he grabbed it, he was going to take it to the city. V'inicho agabi chaveru, and then he leaves it on top of another sheaf. V'shach, when he forgets it. So hatachton shicha, so the lower one, that is considered shicha. V'elyon eno shicha, but the upper one, that's not considered shicha. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, Shneim einon shicha. Both of them are not shicha. Hatachdon mimneshu tam. And the lower one is not shicha because that's tam and that's considered buried. The elyon and the upper one mimnei shu tzaf, because it's floating, it's in the airspace. That's not considered shechacha. And so the Gemara says, Ad kan lo pligi ela b'tachton. It sounds like this machlokas tanoim, they're only arguing about the lower one. There's a machlokas over here, whether the lower one is shechacha or not. Avol be'elyon divrei hakol lo have shechacha, but by the upper one, it seems that everybody agrees that it's not shechacha. It seems that if it's floating, if it's not on the ground, it does not have the status of shechacha. And the Gemara says, Shani Hasam, no, it's different over there. Kevan de ichzik be zachabe. There, the reason why it's not shecha has nothing to do with the fact that it's floating. It's because he was machzik, meaning he took it, he was going to take it to the city, it was in his possession, and so therefore zachabe, therefore he becomes like the owner, and it no longer has the status of shechacha. But the Gemara says, if so, if the upper one is not considered shecha because he had taken it and he took possession of it, so who cares that he put it on top of another sheaf? Afilu b'sadanami, even if he put it on the ground, it would be the same halacha. It would not be shecha. And the Gemara says, indeed, that's actually true. That is true. Everybody agrees that it's not shecha because he took it, he took possession of it. And that's the real reason why it's not shecha. The only reason why the Tosefta says that he put it on top of another sheaf, misham tachdon, that's to tell you the halacha by the lower one, that there's a machlokas tanoim on the lower one, is it considered shecha or not, because maybe it's not considered shecha because it's buried. But the Gemara says, one second, but the Tosefta says explicitly that the reason why the upper one is not shecha, it says it's because it's floating. And so therefore it says, elyon mipnei shehu tzaf. That's what Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon. And so therefore on the contrary, it seems to be saying clearly that the reason why it's not shecha is because it's in the airspace and it's not on the ground. And the Gemara says to that, no, rather say what it really means to say is mipnei shehu kitzaf. Not because it's actually floating, but because it is like it is floating. What that means to say is it is since he picked it up, so therefore that's the floating part. It's like it's still in his hand. It's as if he never put it down in that situation because he was already zoche. That's what it means, mimnei shehu kitzaf. Since when he picked it up, so he was zoche in it, so it's as if it's still in his hand, even though later he put it down, and that's why it's not considered like shechacha. And Rashi explains, shehechzik bo laholicho la'ir. Again, he grabbed it, he took hold of it in order to take it to the city. Sakadaitach hashda de urcha de milsa nakat v'lav dafka. Right now we think that's just the normal case. We don't realize that that's what's creating that it's not shecha. And then the Gemara explained, no, zachabe, then he takes possession, he becomes like the owner, v'sulo haveshicha. Once he's machzik in it to take it to the city, that's what makes it leave from the status of shicha to va'inan shachoach meikaro. Rashi explains, we need it to be forgotten from the beginning. If initially it's not forgotten, he took hold of it, he took possession of it, it doesn't have the status of shicha. Kedamar bevav metzia parakam. That's what we say in the first parak of vav metzia mifnei shu kitzaf. It's as if it's floating, meaning shu pater al shehechzik bo ki ilu hayo denutzaf me agabi karko munach biyado. It's pater because he took possession of it as if it's still in his hand, as if it's floating on the ground and he hadn't put it down. That's what it means, that it's not considered shicha for that reason. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Hareini ke ben Azai b'shukei Tiveria. I'm like Ben Azai in the marketplace of Tiveria, meaning I can answer any question. I'm as sharp as Ben Azai. Amar le'ahumi d'Rabbanan le'Abaya. So one of the Rabbanan took on the challenge, and he said to Abaya as follows: Shnei chalolim zal gabe zel. Let's say there are two corpses, one on top of the other. Mehechon hu modid. Which one of them is considered to be a corpse in terms of the halacha of egla arufa? From which one does he measure? And here are the different sides of the question. Min b'mino have it taman. On the one hand, we could say that these are all of the same type. They're both corpses, and so therefore that's still considered to be taman. The one on the bottom is still considered to be hidden. That one is excluded from the halacha of egla arufa. However, min b'mino lo have it soft, but min b'mino is not considered like floating, and so the upper one is not considered like floating, and therefore it is included in the halacha of egla arufa. Ume'elyon modid, and according to that reasoning, so you'd measure from the upper one. Odilmer, maybe we would say the opposite. Min b'mino have it soft, or min b'mino lo have it tamun. Min b'mino is considered floating, but min b'mino is not considered tamun. It's not considered hidden. Umitachton modid, and in that case we would measure from the bottom one. Odilmer, maybe min b'mino have it tamun, or min b'mino have it soft. Maybe min b'mino is considered hidden and it's considered floating. V'lo mitachton modid, v'lo me'elyon modid. He doesn't measure from the lower one, and he doesn't measure from the other one, from the upper one. Amar le, so he said to him, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Memhei Amud Beis.